Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to RawKnux podcast. Please like, follow, and subscribe.
I thought for sure you were going to say Mike Keenan. As I had a Stu. I had him in Russia, and he was so.
Oh my gosh, that man wore me out.
Yeah.
He wore us all out.
He was crazy.
Oh my gosh,
it's funny.
I mean, coming down to the rink when we were going through like a 2, 3 or more game losing streak. You know, coming down to the rink, you're just holding your head in your hands, going, "What's he gonna do to us today? Like, what's he gonna pull today?" You know.
When I stepped on the ice, I never backed down, and I never stayed down.
And I was vicious, and I was malicious, and I don't care.
I'm alive. He's a freaking madman. Look at him going to town.
Yeah, say hi to Tim. Yeah, I don't know if you ever met Tim. Tim Stapleton played in the NHL Toronto. What was that other team, Tim, you played for? Winnipeg. That's right, Winnipeg. And then he played over in Russia some. But a good friend of mine. I love him. He's a good man.
We're great friends, apparently.
Right on. Right.
Oh, all right.
Great friends. It's just that Knuckles is missing important, significant parts of your background.
Exactly.
Just your life.
Well, that's because I got picked on as a player. I got bullied, and you're one of the guys that bullied me. And Stu Grimson, listen, welcome to the RawKnux podcast. I appreciate you taking the time, pal. I've been looking forward to having you on, and for a number of different reasons. And certainly one of them is we got to spend some time together in retirement. But I want to go back to October 27th, 1990. You as a young kid with the Chicago Blackhawks coming in, you're listed at 6'6", 240. I'm like, oh, shit. I'm 34 years old, and I'm 33. I'm near the end of my career, and I'm going, I know what's going to happen. And I fought you that night. And then the next night, Big Jim McKenzie. And it was the first time really in my career I started to, you know, that little voice in the back of your head saying, man, this is getting tough. I was questioning myself. Yeah. But I go back to that night, and I remember, like, and geez, I was always a guy, when I fought big guys, I had to get in tight because I would have never lasted as long as I did. But we go back to that. What was that like? Because you were young in the league then. Did you have that? You had that mentality. I gotta go after guys like this, because I had it when I came in.
Yeah, no question about it. I think, you know, in that role, and maybe this is similar for players and, you know, that play a different role, but everybody's got to cut their own teeth. You know, you got to find your own way into the mix. And for me, I knew that if I was going to make a name for myself in this, you know, bracket, this category of player, the heavyweight enforcer type, I was going to have to, you know, take on the Chris Nylands, the Proverts, the Dave Browns, the Marty McSorleys of the world. And, you know, I sure had you on my radar that night. I don't remember the circumstances of the game. I feel like it was kind of it felt like it was third period, Knux, and the game had kind of been decided. Yeah. So I don't know. I think I went out of my way to kind of get into it with you, you know, later on in the game. So I remember it being a good tilt. And listen, I mean, you know, the point you're making is one that I applaud the guys all the time that fought the heavyweights, but didn't necessarily have heavyweight dimensions. I mean, you know, guys like in your era, it was guys like you. Before your era, it was guys like Stan Jonathan. In my era, it was guys like Kelly Chase and Ryan Vandenbush. I mean, these guys are like 6'1". They're, you know, maybe just nibbling into the 200s, 210, 215, and they're fighting guys my size, 6'5", 6'6", 240, 250 pounds, and they're holding their own. I mean, the heavyweight guys, like, we did what we did, and anybody could beat anybody on any given night. I thought the guys that had your dimensions, that had to fight the heavyweights, that took it upon themselves to fight the heavyweights, I mean, I had so much respect for you guys, Knux, and it's not just because I'm on your podcast blowing smoke your way. I have said this many, many times about players like you. To me, that takes on a whole different dimension.
Was it harder to fight those guys, or would you prefer someone more your size fighting?
It's a good question, Tim. I really did kind of prefer to fight guys my own size, because it was, and this has been said many times before, you put that question to me, but, if I'm fighting somebody knuckle size, I'm supposed to win. So if he holds his own against me, or if he beats me, God forbid, it's a big win for you, and it's kind of a knock on my reputation. So yeah, I'd much rather lock horns with guys my size. That might be a little kind of illogical, but that was certainly my preference.
Yeah, and I hear that because I prefer the bigger guys because for me, I became a better technical fighter as I went along. When you got a guy you're fighting that size, you have to take away his strength. That's how I fought. I said, I got to take away his best thing, the best thing he has. And then I'll pick my way through the fight. So I certainly get that, but I love fighting the big guys. Yeah. Tim had asked me that.
I prefer you guys fighting. I preferred you guys fighting.
Of course.
Yeah. And I certainly prefer to be a 30-40 goal scorer, but that just wasn't in the DNA. It wasn't in the DNA.
Well, that's the first time we met. Next time we met was in retirement, and I had followed Stu's career for sure. And kept an eye, like I always do, on guys. But I was in Toronto. I think they were honoring Bobby Hull at a alumni event. And Stu was there, and I had never met him. And, people have this, idea that stigma of hockey fighters, all right, big dummies, this and that. They're not intelligent, this and that. Stu got up and he spoke at this event. And I'm going to tell you, Tim, I was blown away. And I'll never forget. And I guess maybe was thinking of that stigma myself. Oh, big dummy hockey player, blah, blah, blah. And Stu walked by and I got out of my chair and I grabbed him. I said, Stu, Chris Island, hey, how you doing, Knuckles? We talked. And I said, you know what? You just impressed the shit out of me. What you just said there blew me away. That was awesome. And, we had a few words and that was it. And I think certainly in our careers, I don't know if you ever felt that stigma of being that, all right, you're a big dumb hockey player. Did people kind of look at you that way? Did you, because I know they did me. And there were times I would get in conversation, people would say, you know what? Yeah, he can carry a conversation. He is smart. He's not a big dummy. Yeah. Did you deal with that at all?
Right. I did. I did a lot, and I never get too kind of jacked up about it when I encounter that that attitude, or it's not even an attitude. It's just people are a little bit surprised because they see the way you play, they see the kind of game you play, they project a certain set of characteristics on you when you're on the ice. Especially when you've shaken your gloves off, you've locked horns with another guy your size, and then you spend 5 minutes in isolation on the other side of the ice. People kind of get this notion in their head that you're just mean, you're nasty, you're maybe something, you're not the sharpest knife in the drawer, and I think they're very surprised when they get a chance to meet guys like you and I, Nux. But here's the thing. And I heard you say this in your lead up to asking me that question. I do that myself all the time. And this is why I tend not to get too jacked up about it when people have that perception of me. Because, I've met guys like Wendell Clark and Brad May and Chris Nyland away from the rink. And these are some of the most engaging, some of the friendliest, most caring people you'd ever want to be around. And that surprises even me, who's another example of that whole deal. So I think it's kind of, we're kind of wired to think that way. We've got these notions in our head that, all the guys that play that role are knuckle dragging mouth breathers. And, we're on our back foot when we meet them. So I get where it comes from, but guys like you, Nux, breaking the mold, my friend, breaking the mold.
Thank you. Appreciate it. You broke it already. But, looking, you're born in Vancouver, and looking at your junior career, play for the Pats. And when I looked at it, then I saw you play college. Now, a lot of kids they make up their mind before they go off. Are we going to college? Or are we going to play junior? You did both. And how did that, how'd that come about? You end up playing junior, then you go off to college. What happened there?
Yeah, it's a great question. I appreciate you picked up on that. I took kind of the unconventional path to the NHL without question. I didn't do it by design. I did it out of I'm just, stumbling around trying to find my way in life at this point. And maybe you went through this, Knux, maybe you didn't. I know lots of guys did. But when you play that physical role, and especially when you're not getting a lot of ice time, it can be a really hard role to play. So I played 3 years as junior. I went off to my first pro training camp with the Calgary Flames. That's who drafted me. I was breaking in with Calgary. And I got to camp and I was just like, you know what? I don't know if this is for me. I don't see myself because I went this route in junior. You know how it is. Yeah. You cut your teeth, you work your way up the totem pole. And by your third year, you're somebody with a solid reputation. You kind of pick and choose your fights to some degree. Standing at the doorstep of my pro career, it was just like, man, I don't know if I can do this all over again. So the short point about that is, I walked out of a pro training camp. I went back to college. I wanted to get a start on my education. I wasn't sure if pro was for me, and it was the 2 years there I spent playing for the University of Manitoba in Winnipeg that I kind of came to the conclusion, you know what? I think I've matured. I think I've grown up a little bit. I think I'm a better player, and I think it's time to go back and see if I can make it to the NHL. I've got to satisfy my curiosity. I've come this far. I've got to take a run at it. So the 2 years of college hockey that I played, just to kind of put a bow on all that, it was just a moment for me to kind of go focus on the game, have some fun, grow, mature, become a better player, and then come back and take an honest run at a pro career and see how far I could take it. But that was necessary for me. It's not necessary for everybody. And honestly, I will say, if I hadn't done that, I think I might have shortened my career at the end of the day, because I think I would have got into a situation where I felt like I might have been over my head. I may have, played 3 or 4 years in the minors and then backed out of it. At the end of the day, when I went back, I knew that I was ready to do it. And for that reason, Knux, I played well into my 30s, and there aren't a lot of guys that do what we do that play well into their 30s. So I'm glad looking back I did it that way. Sorry, it was a really long answer.
No, that's cool.
To your very
that's great.
So that decision to turn pro had nothing to do with wanting to get out of Winnipeg.
Now that's a dig at Tim.
Yeah, I was like, what's wrong? It's paradise over there.
I know what
that
is.
Talking about?
I know what that is. I know what that is. And all respect to Tim Stapleton. Yeah, it was a great way to get out of Winnipeg, 100%.
Now, did you have because
I went from there to Salt Lake City, Utah. Salt Lake City, Utah is pretty nice.
It
town.
is.
Yeah, we're playing golf in December in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Was there a little bit of fear? Was there fear that at that point of going back to college? Did you have to overcome some fear? And if so, how'd you do that?
Yeah, I think it was, it was fear that kind of drove me to that place. It was fear, and again, it's a hard role to play when you're not playing a lot. I think average ice time, if you look at it over the course of our career, I don't think they tracked it when Knux played. Knux played a lot more than me, and when you're out there and you're fighting, you're usually getting into it because it's something happens on the ice. There's a flashpoint, and bang, you're angry, you're pissed off, you're fighting somebody. I used to sit there for a period and a half at a time. You get a tap on the shoulder and you know exactly what you're supposed to be doing. That's a hard thing to do. So that was part of the struggle, Tim. And I think there was the fear of losing too. Like that was something that was really important for me to get over. Like if you circulate in that heavyweight crowd, and I said this before earlier in the podcast, anybody can beat anybody on any given night. You're going to take your lumps at some point. You've got to find a way to get over the fear of just getting beat, getting humiliated. You got to dust yourself and get right back into the mix. or you're going to find yourself, it's been a pretty short career for you. So that was all part of the maturing process for me. It's a good question.
Yeah, for sure. That fear, can be a motivator, right? It can also freeze a lot of people, and you got to be able to walk through them.
Right.
Possibly. There's so much here to talk about. When I think of you and some of the things that directions I want to go. And one, I played with a Christian athlete, Ryan Walter, who I absolutely love to this day. I got my knee replaced. Who called me? Former teammate, Wally. How you doing, Chris?
Wally.
And absolutely love the man. Now, I grew up Catholic, going to church, forced to go to church every Sunday. I drifted from my religion. And then I certainly came back in a way later in life to live a more spiritual life and not just go to church on Sunday and say I'm a good boy. I started to practice some of the principles and values that I did learn growing up, but I got away from. Now, for you, I'm curious, did you always have this faith as a kid, or did you come into this as you got older?
I, like you, grew up in a home, we were Lutheran, pretty similar to Catholic. And I think if you go way back in the Lutheran history, they were kind of an offshoot or a breakaway denomination from the Catholic faith. So I grew up in a Lutheran home. My mom was Lutheran growing up, and we were churched as kids. We went, it became less and less important, as we got older as children. The answer to your question, Knux, is my faith, I kind of maybe revisited my faith at a later stage in my life, probably in my early 20s. And when I was presented with a message, you talked about Ryan Walter, he would have been one of the guys that, kind of, was in my network in and around that time. But I kind of came to understand that your faith should be just a personal relationship between you and your creator, God, rather than a whole list of, rules and regulations and places to go. It had more to do with that personal faith, that personal relationship. And that hit me at a pretty relevant time in my early 20s. So, my faith journey really started to take greater meaning for me, started to make a lot more sense for me. And I will say, helped really guide me through that period of time that we just finished talking about, where, I'm kind of wrestling with, can I play this role in in the NHL? Do I have what it takes to turn pro? My faith was something that I was able to lean on, and it really kind of helped get me through that moment in time.
All right, I get that, but the Christian faith, having that strong faith and finding your way in the NHL, and with your faith at the same time, did you ever struggle with your role as an enforcer, doing what you had to do on the ice, saying, people look at it on the outside and say, oh, that's really Christian, like going around beating people up. You know what I mean?
Right.
So did you struggle with that?
No, I won't say that I ever struggled with it. I got that question a lot, and I understood where that question comes from. It came down to this for me, Knux. I used to say, in the context of this locker room, if somebody, and you and I played in a different era of the game than it is today. Back then, that role was vital. And I used to say, if somebody needs to play the role of protector and enforcer, and he needs to watch the backs of the smaller people, the skilled people, the Steve Yzermans, the Paul Correas of this roster, the Tim Stapletons of this roster. I never had to stop in Winnipeg in the NHL, but I said, if somebody needs to play that role, why can't it be a Christian? Why can't it be a guy that that has a strong faith, and he's essentially, I'm not filling a 30, 40 goal scorer's role, but I'm filling a vital role that's kind of less glamorous, really hard to play, but one that your teammates really respect and admire. So the funny part about it is, Knux, all my teammates knew my faith, but they also knew what I did on the ice. they never struggled with that because they valued the role that I played. And I guess it was the way that I did it that they never saw that there was a conflict between what I believed as a, you know, as a Christian and what I did on the ice. So that all seemed to make sense for me. And I think that one other important point here, it's not like I'm walking around on the streets of Nashville behaving that way. It all took place in the context of, you know, an NHL game, NHL competition, where that kind of thing is, I mean, it's accepted as accepted as boxing, for example. So, you know, that kind of made, that to me was, you know, an important part of the, you know, the justification at the same time, if that makes sense.
Have you ever thought about what the road would have looked like if you didn't have your faith? Like for example, you know, I know with that role, a lot of guys, you know, have dealt with, you know, struggles of addiction or, you know, whatever, alcoholism, addiction, and just trying to cope with, you know, did you have experience in that? Or did you ever think like what, if you didn't have your faith, what that would have looked like?
Yeah, I do. I thought about that a lot. I think my faith helped kind of sustain me, carry me through some really tough times. Like that transitional, that trying to get it straight in my head. Can I play this role? What's the mindset in how I play this role? And I will tell you this, you know, a breakthrough moment for me, and it might seem kind of strange to think of it this way. When I was first cutting my teeth in the NHL, like the path to the NHL led right through Dave Brown. I was breaking in with the Calgary Flames. He was playing for Edmonton at the time. That's one of the fiercest rivalries in the game at that time. And even today, I knew if I was going to stick around, I had to beat Brownie. I'll try and give you the short version of this. Fought him on a Sunday night, beat him, laid out the heavyweight champion of the NHL. He was probably the meanest, baddest mother in the game at that point. Fair to say, Knux?
Fair to say.
So I laid him out. I laid him out, and then I fought him 2 nights later back in Calgary. He wrecked me, absolutely wrecked me. Fractured my orbital in 3 places, broke my cheekbone. I had facial reconstructive surgery. Tim, it's as bad a beat as you can ever suffer as a fighter. But at that moment, I kind of came to this realization. And remember, go back to the point I was making earlier. I dealt with the fear of losing, not so much the fear of being hurt. I could take pain. Pain's not difficult to deal with. The humiliation of losing in front of your teammates, your coach, 20,000 fans, that's what I feared. So the beat to Brownie, I'm kind of going, you know what? This is the worst I can ever suffer. This is the worst beat I could ever suffer. But if I can bounce back from this, I've got nothing left to fear. So rather than being the moment where I kind of packed up shop and my NHL career is over, I had a moment. It was a breakthrough. It was kind of a moment of liberty and freedom. And the whole point in saying that, Tim, is I think it was leaning on my faith. When you can kind of just like dump all your crap at the foot of the cross at God's feet and say, you know what? I can't control this. I'm going to show up. I'm going to do my level best. But a lot of this is out of my control. It's in your hands, God, my creator. There's a lot of freedom in that. So again, another long answer, but that's kind of where my faith was central to me early on in my career. So it's a great question.
That's
again.
An awesome answer. It's one that I guess you wouldn't normally hear, the way you looked at that. And, you know, along with your faith and your backbone as a person, to be able to get back upright and do that again, man, not easy. A lot of guys, that breaks a lot of guys. You know, when you break your orbital bone, when your face is messed up like that, or you have a severe injury, something that you end up questioning yourself, am I going to do this again? And 100%. A lot of guys deal with it. And so it's refreshing to hear that answer. No question about it. And, you know, we've had our interactions, and I want to get to one of them, but, a little more on the hockey. When your career dealing with coaches. Now, I love to talk about tough guys at this because I was very fortunate here in Montreal. Played with Carbonneau and Gainey. They wanted me to be more than just a fighter. They wanted me to be an everyday guy, and I got a shit ton of help to achieve that goal. I was a willing participant, and I worked my ass off, but boy, I had great direction and a lot of help. Did you ever struggle with the, tap on the shoulder? Because I always said to myself, if I ever have a coach that tells me go and fight, there's going to be a problem. And it happened to me one time. I ended up getting traded because of the problem. But I stayed true to myself in that. But I would struggle with that. And near the end, I remember Bob Gainey telling me, Knux, near the end of your career, you're going to be struggling with ice time at times. If you're able to deal with that, sitting on the bench, playing here and there, limited time, you can squeak another year or two out of your career and make some money. But if you can't, you're going to have a hard time with it. But I guess the question for me, the coach-player relationship in that role, did it cause any problems with you?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I know a lot of guys, have had to deal with this in different ways. I kind of adopted, and I honestly, Knux, I suppose it came from, I never ever wanted anybody to a coach specifically, to put me in a light, to put me in a situation where, they had to tell me like outright, I need you to do this. I need you to do this in this way. And, cause I thought it was disrespectful to the way, to the guys that played that role, right? I mean, you don't tell a goal scorer to go out and score a goal where it's assumed they're going to try to do that every night. That's their whole objective. That's part of what you and I used to do. So I guess for those reasons, that never sat well with me. And I think the pointed answer to your question is, because I never wanted a coach to put me in that situation, I was hypersensitive, and I think almost to a fault, hypersensitive to situations on the ice. Yeah. You know what it's like? I've heard Marty McSorley say this. A guy that has the enforcer mindset, the protector policeman mindset, you're always evaluating what's going on the ice. How's my team playing? Are we flat? Are we on it? What's the score look like? Is there a moment where I need to do what it is I'm expected to do? So the point I'm making is I would do that before it even crossed the coach's mind that we could really use a scrape right now. I'd go out and do it before he ever had the chance to say it to me. Now, I did play for a guy or two along the way that would kind of, poke me in the ribs and, hey, we could really use this tonight, Stu. That's hard. He brought me aside rather than in the context of a game, hey, tap, tap, and everybody in the building knows you're out there for that reason. So for the most part, I didn't deal with that a lot, but because I was like preemptive. I tried to be ahead of it. You know what I mean?
That was great. I like that because I don't think people understand, especially not in hockey, that, that's what makes you guys the best, is that a majority of the time of what you're doing wasn't about you, right? Like you weren't going out there to be like, hey, this is about, like, you were doing it for a reason, and so that was good. I appreciate that answer.
So that piece there with the coaching thing, and just to touch on a bit from my end, I was fortunate. I had a coach in Jacques Lemaire who told me, listen, you fight too much, slow down. It's almost like I didn't trust him. I'm like, well, I'm going to slow down fighting. I'm going to be out the door. Get out of here. And then he would, at home, he would take me out of situations. Like I'd be on the ice and they'd throw someone out. All of a sudden he'd be pulling me off the ice and I'm going, shaking my head. I don't want to be, I'm thinking that he's pulling me off. I'm looking like a wimp, But he genuinely cared for me and understood that I knew my role. And he didn't have to tell me. Right. So that's so cool. So the Blackhawks, the Ducks, the Wings, the Kings, the Preds. When you look at the teams you played for, what was your, I guess, your best years in hockey? The most fun you had? Favorite teammates, stuff like that.
That's always a hard question for me to answer because anybody's objective, no matter what role you play, it's to have great team success. So, going to the finals twice with Chicago in '92 and then the Blackhawks, Detroit in '95. those were my 2 trips to the Stanley Cup Finals. I would highlight those as some of a pair of the most memorable years I ever had. But, for guys like me, I think you kind of have to, it's also interesting to look at, like, where was the best fit? Like, where did a coach really, and the roster kind of fit you best, that you were able to kind of play a lot, contribute in other ways? And for me, I will say LA, but 1 year I spent in LA, we had a really good team, a great group of guys. Rob Blake was there. Luc Robitaille was there. It was just a really, really solid group. And our coach, Andy Murray, used me in a fairly regular rotation and really leaned on me for leadership. Similar experience when I was in Hartford, and then Hartford moved to Carolina. So I was part of that organization for 2 years, but played under Paul Maurice there. And Paul Maurice today remains probably, no disrespect to anybody else I played for, but he was a guy that worked with me, that communicated with me directly, that gave me a lot of responsibility as a leader. And playing under Paul for those 2 years, Hartford, then Carolina, that was a really good fit for me. Looking back, I actually asked for a trade to get out of Carolina. Looking back, I don't know if that was the right thing to do, because it was such a good fit for me back then. But, those are just a few kind of thoughts I have around my best memories as a team.
I thought for sure you were going to say Mike Keenan. As I had him in Russia. And he was so.
Oh my gosh, that man wore me out. Yeah. He wore us all out.
He was crazy.
Oh my gosh,
it's funny.
I mean, coming down to the rink when we were going through like a 2, 3 or more game losing streak, coming down to the rink, you're just holding your head in your hands, going, "What's he gonna do to us today? Like, what's he gonna pull today?"
It's funny. Yeah. Tim said going over to Russia. He's over there. Not many English speaking guys, and he figures Mike Keenan, the coach, we'll probably get along, right, Tim?
Yeah, and then he was full on 90s Iron Mike. And picture him doing what he's doing, and like no one understands what he's saying, like but me. I was like the only guy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a really good point. Imagine Mike's antics, but you don't speak the language that Mike.
Everyone's
speaks.
just hey Tim, what are you saying? I'm like, he's saying, keep going. He's saying a lot of positive things, guys. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Oh man.
If you love your pet like I love my Saint Bernard Adele, you'll want to feed them a balanced, biologically appropriate raw diet. The reason I've chosen Formula Raw is because all blends of their food are locally sourced, and they consist of exclusively human-grade meat and organs, as well as fruits and vegetables. And all products used are hormone and antibiotic free. So like I said, if you love your pet like I love Adele, you'll choose Formula Raw. Make sure you go to formularaw.com and use the promo code RawKnux at checkout to receive 10% off your first order. That's RawKnux, RawKnux. God, looking at the time, like I said, we spent together. So your career, when we look at, you had those fights with Brownie, some big bouts, and he was huge. We had Brownie on last week. He's awesome. Certainly love the guy. And
he's a big puppy. I love him. I mean, I consider it one of the real joys of my post-athletic career is having like it's so funny, right? We lock horns, like we fight each other on the ice, but honestly, fast forward 10 years later, and all those same guys, it's like instant rapport, right? I was with Brownie like 3 weeks ago in Philly. They had this crazy Friday night fight night. Speaking.
I went to it. I went to it. The first one they had, I went to it. That's hilarious, right?
And I'm having dinner with Brownie, hanging out, talking about old times, talking about his team. And I got to tell you, it's like some of the most enjoyable moments of my life are hanging out with guys I used to, we used to break each other's, faces with our bare hands, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's so awesome. But, and we talk about those times getting together, and we had the opportunity to get together, went to Afghanistan, which was for me, I remember the first time I went, it was a really moving trip. We went to visit the troops, Tim, and everybody I've talked to has gone there. When they come back, they've have had this experience that you just can't get anywhere else unless you join the services, and then it's like for real. You're not going there on an exciting vacation. But we got the opportunity to go, and I remember sitting on a pallet in the back of a C-140 with Stu, and we're talking about all sorts of things, and just got to know each other a little more. And then when we got to Afghanistan, met some of the troops, did some of the things, we got invited by General Hillier to fly out to a forward operating base called RawKnux.
Yeah.
It was at the foot of a dam in a big, huge lake in the middle of Afghanistan. And we went out, and General Hillier said, "Hey, you guys want to shoot at the Taliban today?" And we were like, "Yeah, sure." We jump in the Jeep and we drive up the back of the camp, and there's 2 howitzers there with 2 groups of soldiers at each one, like 5 guys. So go ahead, boys. We get up there. Stu, take it from there, because I know you're going to give it to me.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple points I want to make in all this. Let me leave the longer points for second. The first point I want to make is my lasting memory of shooting the howitzers with Knuckles is his trousers were soaked kind of from the crotch right down to the knees after he shoots the howitzer. Somehow, some way, he was standing the whole time, but he lost control of his faculties because this gun is so bloody awesome. And you could watch the shell go for miles before it penetrated the mountaintop, the top of the hill opposite us. But the concussion from this thing would just rock your world. But I remember we had a whole lot of fun because there's a bit of a catch to it, like being able to fire a howitzer successfully, at least back then. There's a bit of a catch to it. So it took Knux and I a little bit to kind of master that. But I mean, honestly, just pull back and talk about the whole experience. That was easily, and I tell people this all the time, it was probably the most amazing experience of my entire life. We went into a theater of war on a military aircraft, escorted by the military, the Canadian Armed Forces. And my God, Knux, you and I are hanging out inside the International Coalition base. We're meeting all the fine men and women who were there defending our freedoms on a daily basis. I mean, we're watching, tiny little females, 5'2", are walking around the camp. They've got an AK-47 slung over their shoulders, and it's like, that's the baddest human being I know right now. She's like half my size. And I to tell you that moment where we went out to the forward operating base, I mean, we're a few hundred feet above the deck. They've got the sides of the copter open. Knux is hanging out one side. I'm hanging out the other side. We got a pair of gunners on either side of us protecting our ass as we're flying a few hundred feet off the deck over top of this terrain, this area. I mean, it looks like these people are living in biblical times. Yeah. They're like little folks walking around, paths to God knows where they're going. They've got a donkey in tow. And it's like, dude, what, where are you going? What are you doing? What is this? It just seemed like thousands and thousands of years ago, but it was easily the most amazing experience that I've ever had. And top it all off, we're at a rock concert in the desert. Remember?
Knux?
We went over there with three different musicians, 3 different groups.
Blue Rodeo?
Blue Rodeo. Yeah. Blue Rodeo, Juno award-winning Blue Rodeo went there with us. Great bunch of guys. But we're sitting backstage watching all these men and service women enjoy this. I mean, it was surreal. There are military helicopters hovering in the back over the boardwalk. It's black as it's pitch black night out, and there's these copters hovering in the back. There's a rock band playing in front of us. We're at a rock concert in the desert. It was one of the most surreal experiences of my life.
There was a Tim Hortons there. There was a Burger King. There was a Pizza Hut. It was like, are we really in a war zone? But, when I think of that, we flew in that, the British pilots flew us in a Griffin helicopter. The doors were wide open.
That's right.
And it's funny, Stu was behind me with the gunner on that side. I was with General Hillier on this side. And I look back, and Stu's sitting next to the gunner, and on the back of his helmet just said, "Go ahead, make my day." And he's sitting on this.
Make my day.
Like, oh,
make my day.
Like, I don't think I want to do that part of it today. Wait till we get out anyway, But I'm telling you, like Stu said, we're above the Helmand River, which the Arghandab Valley cuts through this mountain pass. And we were flying up through this valley, Tim. It was unbelievable. We were above the river. And it was like, honestly, looking down at the river, it looked it was like paradise. But it was. And Stu put it perfect. It's like biblical there. Mm-hmm. You wonder, these people, they are like, are we really ahead in life here? But boy, when you think of way behind, it's incredible. And everybody I speak to has been there, and you just said it. It was a life-changing experience. It really did something to me. It was awesome.
When I hear it, I'm like, when I hear it, I think about like sacrifice. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll pick up my daughter instead of golf today. That's my sacrifice. Then you hear this stuff,
exactly
and it's like, man, we got it good. We got it good for sure.
One of my other favorite memories with all that, I think you were there at the time too, Knux. We had this conversation earlier about, it's strange when you meet people who do a certain thing, you don't expect them to have this personality that they do. We met a group of sharpshooters, and one of these kids held the current Afghanistan record for longest kill shot, confirmed kill shot. This guy had taken out a bad guy from like 1.5 miles away, and he's showing us the weapon and he's showing us the round that he did it with. I kid you not, the ammunition, like the bullet, was almost as long as my hand is from top to bottom. It was almost that long, and you didn't just shoot somebody with something like that. Like, that thing will remove your body parts even from that far away. But he was like 1.5 miles. He has the longest confirmed kill shot in Afghanistan. But it's this skinny little kid, happy-go-lucky, easy-going. I mean, as easy to talk to as the three of us are together. And I mean, this guy is like, he's on the very tip of the spear where, the Canadian and American Armed Forces are concerned. This is what the tip of the spear looks like.
I'll never forget that. We put the ghillie suit on. They had that, the suit they wear, Tim, to camouflage themselves, and they had all the sniper. It was really incredible experience to meet those guys. We had the opportunity to visit the hospital there too, with some injured people. It was something. And when you say these people really, they sacrifice. So, awesome trip. So we get back from Afghanistan, you go your way, I go mine. You retired from hockey, and you went back you went back to school. You got your law degree, decided to practice law. Impressive. And I say that because, and I'm one of the guys, and a lot of athletes struggle with retirement. I got lost, no question. And when I see someone who does well, I don't feel less than, I don't feel jealous of, or not. I'm quite actually happy for that person. And when I saw what you did going back to law school, it was impressive. I was just saying, that's awesome, and how difficult for you was it after playing hockey all those years, that transition piece, and how did you you jumped right into school right away. You didn't waste any time, right?
Yeah, I did. I always knew that, for a guy like me, like, I wanted to go back into the sport. I wanted to do something in the sport meaningful. And honestly, like, my whole motivation behind going back to school and ultimately earning a law degree was so that I could players union eventually. I did that. That kind of went sideways later on. But it was always to kind of, increase like the professional skills that I had. That was my whole motivation for doing it. But, the point I really want to make, Knux, if you don't mind me just kind of taking a little license here, because I think you were trying to draw a contrast between, you struggled, in your words, you got lost, and you're making a comparison to me. I want to make the point, we all struggle. We all get lost. Outwardly, it might look like, hey, Stu Grimson left the NHL. He got his degree. He went on. He did great things. That's maybe half true. I struggle too. Whether you're a firefighter, a hockey player, an electrician, a sheet metal worker, if you've done something, and for us, Knux, like me, you've been playing since you were 5 years, 6 years of age. We've been doing this our whole life. When you're forced to go from this was what you did, now you can't do that anymore. Now you got to go off and you got to create something with, we're looking at more than half of our lives are remaining that we're going to walk around on this planet. We got to do something. But I struggle too, is the point that I want to make. It took me a while. I had some direction. I knew I wanted to go back to school, but it took me a while to kind of figure out what the next part was going to look like. So I say that because I want everybody to understand, whether you're an athlete or somebody else, there's going to come a transition time. It's going to be hard, but you'll figure it out. Stay true to yourself. You'll figure it out.
Yeah.
That's
and
good.
It's fun.
That's good.
And it's funny.
I
say
lose.
that.
It's been 4 years, and I'm still like, there's days where I wake up and I'm like, I don't know what my purpose is, right? Like I lose sense of purpose.
Yeah, 100%, Tim. 100%. We all go through that, and I think for any ex-player or even a player later in their career that's looking at the three of us having a conversation, I think it's important they take that away from it. Everybody in their own way, you're going to have, kind of that, it's hard to figure out what the next part looks like, but, be diligent. You'll figure it out. You'll figure it out.
So for you in ending your career, and I guess I asked that with this thought in mind, because back when the film The Last Gladiator was being made, and you were interviewed for that, and Alex Gibney was doing it, the NHL gave the producers a hard time because, it was talking about fighting, and I was in this film, and Daly and Bettman weren't happy. They said, why don't you do it on somebody other than Chris Nyland? Why don't you do it on someone like Stu Grimson? This is coming from the NHL. And Alex Gibney and the producers, Barry, said, well, if that's the case, if you want us to do it on Stu, then we're going to have to open up that whole concussion issue. Well, they were all like, well, maybe just go with the drug addict alcoholic then. And it kind of pissed me off. And they made it really difficult for the guys doing that film, because they don't want to expose any of what happened. They don't even want to believe that happened back in the day, what we did. But regardless, so when you retired from hockey, what in the word is, you had concussions. You had a fight with, was it Larac, I think? And at the end, you had
it was George. Yeah, it was
now,
George.
how many concussions did you get, if you don't mind asking, and me asking? And how difficult was that on you when you had to step away from the game because of that?
Yeah, it was hard. It's really, knowing that how the science, the medicines have evolved to this point, we know a lot more about what is a concussion, how to diagnose it, and I think everybody's better off kind of how you treat it. I think there's a lot more awareness around that. Looking at it through that lens, looking back over my life, I mean, I can go back to my 4th and 5th year of age, just a young kid where, I had blackout episodes from head trauma. So to give you a hard, fast number would be really difficult, but it's dozens. I'm sure I had dozens of what now is classified as a concussion. But here's the kicker about it. I fought George at a much earlier time in my career than the time that actually led to my retirement. And I mean, I took blows like that. You took blows like that, for a good part of your career. But the accumulation, and when you continue to take those blows well into your 30s, you don't shake them off like you did when you were in your early 20s. So the head trauma, the blow that actually led to my retirement, when I fought George in my second to last game, when he was an Oiler and I was a Predator, You know, it was a pretty stiff shot, but it was kind of another
The
kind
cherry
of
on the
situation
cake,
where
the cherry on the bowl ice.
it was like the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the best way to describe it. And I was having symptoms like when I was in my early 20s, I never had a concussion carry over into day 2, day 3, day 4. But when I was in my mid 30s, it was like I got 3 days removed from a fight, you know, I had earlier in the week, and it's like, man, my body feels really heavy. And I'd stand up, and it was just like I felt like I was 300 pounds. I was like, something shifted here. Something's going on. And, you know, the tough guy nature, it took me a while. It probably took me 4 good head blows in that year that I retired, before I actually came forward and said, hey, I think something really shitty is going on here. And my trainer pulled me out of the mix. And, you know, frankly, my body just never gave me permission to get back to playing. So that's the kind of way it kind of evolved for me. But, you know, sitting here today, I leave the game pretty intact. I feel pretty normal. I dealt with the post-concussion syndrome for probably a good year and a half, but I feel pretty normal today.
Did you have any regret at that point? Where did you regret? Like, were you like ever like, man, I wish I didn't do that role? Were you ever like, my kids are never going to be able to, I would never have my kids take that role on, or what was, like, you know,
I did. Tim, I had that feeling. I don't think I'd ever want my son to really, here's the thing. I wouldn't want him to go through it in that way. I mean, if my son decided he wanted to be, you know, a pro hockey player, if he decided he wanted, you know, fighting as part of his toolbox, that's part of his skill set, I would have never begrudged him that. The only, I think, desire I would have for my young son following my path was, and this is what I look back at my career and I really wish I had done, when you get clipped and when something shifts inside you, and we all know when that is, Knux, I just wish I'd been more forthcoming with the trainers. You know,
really hard to do. That's hard to do.
It's really, there's so much. You've got all your internal crap going on. Plus you're kind of going, these guys will lose respect for me. I'll lose my roster spot. You know, I can't have everybody around the league knowing that I pulled myself out of the mix. I encourage young players today, you got to self-report. Nobody knows, like you know, what's going on inside here. You got to self-report. But it's the very thing I couldn't do, I wish I had done. That's the point that I really want to make around your question, Tim. I don't regret anything about my career. I wish I had self-reported more. I didn't. And I think, you know, my 60s and my 70s, I think, will kind of reveal whether I have any long-lasting effects. But as I sit here today, a 57-year-old man, Knux is completely intact. He's engaged. He's articulate. He's an enthusiastic, positive thinking guy. That encourages me about my 60s. But, you know, you never know until you kind of get into that period of your life. That's my one concern.
Yeah,
I feel good today, but you never know.
I was going to ask you about that. Like, now here's the deal. We've seen it. Now, Boston University has an incredible program, the Chronic Traumatic Encephalopathy Center, CTE Center. There we go, Knuckles. I got it out.
I wouldn't try that. I wouldn't try that word.
Well, you know, they do a lot of research on retired football players. People donate their brains. We saw our good friend Bob Probert donated his brain. There was certainly CTE there. Now, that being said, do you worry about that? And I'll be honest with you, I don't worry about it. I've thought about it, and I'm at the point right now. I look, my mom, God bless her, suffers from dementia. And she's, the last 15 years, it's been just horrendous. She's still alive. She's 87, but not good. And I'm looking at, and I'm actually going to Boston University next month to go through their program. It's a 2-day, beginning of the program is 2 days. You MRI, and they give you a base level of where you are right now. They can't say if you have CTE or not, but there are warning signs and signals. You do different neurological tests, stuff like that. And then they check in once a year, and you kind of get tested again, and you can kind of see where you're at. And I'm going to do it. And I'm pretty close to saying I'm going to donate my brain too, because shit, what am I going to take it with me? I don't think so. I'm thinking of doing that, but I'm going next month to start that program off. Have you ever looked into that or thought about doing that, or does it worry you at all?
Yeah, I have. I'm actually in a program right now, similar to the one you're talking about. It's a health care facility in Toronto. I was asked this question again recently. I can't remember. I want to say Ryerson, but I don't think it's Ryerson in Toronto. I might be wrong about that. And it's the very thing you're talking about. I had this initial consult with them. They ran a bunch of tests. There's cognitive tests. There's functional working MRIs. You're responding to different cues while you're in an MRI machine. Of course, there's blood drawn and all that kind of thing. It's really comprehensive. And then I've been back for a couple episodes of follow-up since then. They give me kind of feedback on how things are going, and just, the short generalization, I'm aging pretty well, for what it's worth. But I think it's important, Knux. It's important. We get a personal benefit. You and I and guys like us get a chance to kind of gauge how we're doing. And then I think too, and this is obvious, but we're part of a broader study, which helps the world of science, the world of medicine, to better understand the ill effects of head trauma when, sustained over a longer period of time. That's important for all the people that come after us as well. So I have made the designation to donate my brain as well. I think I'm with you. I'm not going to be using it beyond my 90s, potentially 100s. So somebody else might as well benefit from whatever that will tell them.
I'm with you right there. Yeah. I have this goal that I want to make it to 100. So hopefully that happens. It's funny. Back in October 6th, 2011, I just moved back to Montreal that August. And I just getting back on my feet. I just rented a home in Dorval, just outside the airport. No furniture. I had a TV. I was sitting on the floor eating Chinese food with Jamie. And Hockey Night in Canada's on. And I get up and I run into the kitchen to grab something. And all of a sudden I hear her say, "Who is this asshole?" And I'm there. What? I come back and he said, "You got to hear what this guy said." Well, she doesn't know Don Cherry from Adam. And Grapes was on between periods and come out and had called myself, Stu, and Jim Thompson, called us pukes and hypocrites because apparently we made remarks about how fighting should be out of hockey and they should take it out, which I never said those words. But anyway, someone was whispering in his earpiece and gave him our names. Anyway, he come out and said it. And I was like, that is just damn wrong. That's embarrassing because I never come out and said anything like that. Anyway, I knew a good lawyer. So anyway, the good lawyer called me and it was Stu. And we got talking. He said, "Knux, this is just wrong, blah, blah, blah." And maybe pick it up there from Stu and tell us just kind of the process, what you were thinking. And you certainly asked me to come aboard. And I was like, sure thing. But talk to us.
Yeah. I like you. I was sitting at home. I didn't have Hockey Night in Canada because I was in the U.S. at the time. I was living in Nashville. But my phone started to blow up around that same time that you and Jamie were kind of going through this or hearing this. And I was like, where the hell did this come from? Like, I'm sitting at home in my pajamas and all of a sudden I'm getting torpedoed by Don Cherry on the other side of the border. It was like, made no sense at all. But here's the thing. Knux and I, in our first conversation, we both, we got to the point pretty quick. Like, I've never said anything like that. You've never said anything like that. I think Jimmy Thompson was different. They lumped us in together a little bit, which is neither bad nor good. But the part that he was wrong on that. But like the part that I really was bothered by, you left one out: pukes, hypocrites, and turncoats.
That's it.
Like,
I did.
Like, he's going live on national television with this bullshit, and he couldn't be more wrong. I don't know if you and I ever discussed it, but the little voice in his ear, from what I have heard, that was George LaRocque. George had a conversation with Don. Apparently they were pretty good buddies. Yeah. And George mentioned to Don, hey, I don't know if you know this or not, Grape, but, Knux and Stu are kind of going around saying fighting should be banned. They made their whole careers this way. That's really shitty by them. Knux and I never said anything like that. So, one, he was wrong. And two, the way he said it really pissed me and you off, because like pukes, hypocrite, turncoat, that's some bullshit. Yeah. That's some absolute bullshit. So all that to say, that was kind of the flashpoint for the three of us, me, you, and Jimmy, getting together. I was litigating at the time. I was working for a law firm here in town. And I said to one of the partners at the firm, I said, here's what happened. What I'd really like to do is kind of start this little media campaign against Don Cherry and CBC for him making the comments he just made. Are you okay with that? So it was kind of like everything I did and said came from a law firm. I was the name, and the guys were, obviously included with me. Jimmy and Knux were with me, but, it kind of came from my firm. And I remember it was like, Don said what he said, then the three of us kind of got together and I issued a statement on our behalf, and we'd launched that back, and I'd end up doing like a TV spot from a remote location in Nashville. CBC would beam me into their broadcast. And it was kind of like, these bombs were going back and forth between us and Cherry. And here's the funny part about it, Tim. Like, Grapes doesn't apologize for
anything.
Shit, not for anything. He doesn't apologize for shit. But we made noise about this. We rattled the legal saber to the point where CBC's going like, man, we might get sued for this. And if we do, we'll probably lose because Don's dead wrong. So all that to say, probably Knux took 2 weeks before it all played out. But Grapes, like this issue, I can't believe the momentum and the traction it had, certainly back home, not so much down here. But I can't believe the momentum it had. The political pressure got to a point where Grapes showed up on television and full-throated for 3 solid minutes. He walked every piece of it back. He talked about Jimmy. He talked about Stu. He talked about his old buddy Chris Nyland. And he walked it back as to all three of us. Like, it was loud and full-throated. And just to put a bow on it all, Knux and I had dinner maybe a month later in Montreal as we kind of put it all to bed. And it was just like, we got a good result. We were pleased with the fact that this guy apologized for the bullshit he said.
And you guys both got him canceled and got him removed.
No, he got himself canceled.
I'm kidding. No, what's your take on today's game, Stu, and the reduction of fighting? And do you wish you think you could have played in today's game?
Oh, I don't think so. Boy, these kids are fast. Right? They're fast and they're really skilled. If Stu Grimson could play in today's game, he'd look a little bit like Pat Maroon, I think. Maybe not top end speed, but a really good guy in the wall. He's strong in his own end. He's capable of a little offense here and there. And a formidable opponent when he drops the gloves. I don't know if I had the skill set that a Pat Maroon did. If I could make it, I'd look like Pat Maroon. I honestly, I don't know. It's a really hard question to ask. But let me answer the first part. Let me answer the first part of your question. In spite of all that, I really like where the game is at today. I really do. It's exciting. It's fast. The skills that these young men demonstrate night to night. Do I wish it was a little more physical? Yeah. Fighting's still in it. There's still that, that it's in the ether, it's in the air, it could happen. So there's kind of still this measure of accountability. You got to be careful if you start running the small people, the skill people on the other side. All in all, I don't think the game's perfect, but I think it's in a better spot than when I played, because just by virtue of the things these guys do, the way they skate, the way they handle the puck,
Michigan, all the fancy stuff.
It's unbelievable.
It is.
It's unbelievable.
It is.
It's a lot of fun to watch.
And when you think of today's game and talking about the fighting piece, I saw last night Winnipeg, Minnesota. Dean Everson coaching Minnesota, and here's a guy I played against back in Hartford, scrappy little center iceman, not tough, but scrappy. And it's always those guys. The game's done, 3-1, 30 seconds left. They put Reeves on the ice. And I could see it in Reeves' face. He's always a willing participant, but I could tell he wasn't happy about being put out there 30 seconds. And he went and did what he did anyway. He got in a fight. And for me, I lose respect for a coach like that who did that. And we talked about this earlier. But that being said, what do you think of that today? They're talking about taking fighting out of the Quebec League they're talking about junior hockey. NHL, do you think it ever happened?
Well, it's hard to answer that definitively, Knux, and I think for this reason, I've always felt like, and this comes from my experience, working on the competition committee with the players union, where the NHL was concerned, like around stuff like rules and rule changes. The league looks at the junior leagues, the minor leagues, like they're laboratories, right? Like they're test grounds for these different rule changes. So I think the league will be watching to see how things play out in the queue, and maybe some other leagues adopt this before they ever go that direction. But I kind of get the sense that the league is kind of, there may be a movement in this direction to ban fighting outright, because it came up at the last general managers meetings. I don't know if you saw it or not, but one of the issues on the agenda for the managers was this whole notion about fights that occur after big hits on the ice, right? Clean body check. Somebody gets hit. Somebody on that player's team goes out. They think they gotta, avenge this guy, stick up for this guy. To the extent that they may be thinking about, I think here's the way I want to say it. I think it gives us a sense that there may be a stronger movement to move away from fighting than there has been in the past. That's just me kind of talking off the top of my head. It'll be interesting to see, but we'll see where that shakes out.
For sure. Listen, you've been generous with your time. I just got a couple more. One, I know the new director of the Players Association pretty well, Marty Walsh. He was in the Biden administration. He's the mayor of Boston for years. He's a really good guy. What do you think about that jump? Here's a guy. He was a Bruins fan growing up. Doesn't really know the game so much, but he was a great labor lawyer for the IBEW in the Electrical Workers Union in Boston. He negotiated awesome deals for them. My son's in that union. They got great benefits, everything, the packages. Do you think certainly that experience, it'll help him, but taking that experience and jumping over into the hockey world. Listen, I get it. It's law, it's negotiation, all that stuff. But you think it's going to be kind of a smooth transition for him to be able to all of a sudden be negotiating on behalf of not those blue collar workers, but these young millionaire hockey players?
Yeah, I think, it's a really good question. I think he's got, I think his background leaves him in a really good position to do a great job, because I like you. I think you have a better sense of it than I do. But the little I've been able to learn about Marty, I recognize this is a guy that's really had a formidable professional career. He's, you don't get to be part of, an American cabinet, like one administration's cabinet, a cabinet member, because somebody owed you a
put
favor.
a bumper sticker on your car. Yeah.
Exactly. Like this guy, he's well qualified, I guess is the point that I'm trying to make. My concern for him is that, he doesn't have that hockey background necessarily. I don't know that there's really, there aren't a lot of ex-players that work for the players union on a full-time basis that can help him supplement that. I mean, I know Matt Schneider's there. I don't know what the relationship is between the two of them. Perhaps that's a strong one going forward. I think he'll lean heavily on somebody like Matt Schneider going forward. But it'll be interesting in time to see how he does, without question. I think the hardest thing, and maybe this is the real eye opener for him. And I've seen some of his interviews. I've heard some of his comments, and I know he's well aware of this. The part that we always struggled at the union level, Knux, and I know you're aware of this, but it's like this apathy, right? Like 20%, 25%, maybe 30% of the membership is engaged in the actual business of the union. I think that's very different. Again, they're like $1 million hockey players. That's different from, a collective of plumbers who your fortunes kind of rise and fall with the deal that the union makes for you. I think people like that tend to be more engaged. I think that'll be a bit of a challenge and maybe even a shocker for somebody.
So you worked for them before. I don't know. I know you're out of it. And that speech you had that night certainly opened my eyes to some of it. But would you ever have interest in working for them again?
I don't know. Probably not. I mean, I left there under, I was hired under the Ted Saskin administration. Ted hired me. I left. It was kind of baby out with the bathwater, and there was some kind of hard feelings there, just to put it in a real, succinct way. So I'd be considered somebody with baggage. I don't think it would ever work out.
Well, let me put it this way. Forget about it. If you were, just say you were the director right now, and you brought it up, you got 25% of those guys engaged, the rest not so much. And I remember I was one of the 75% who was like, okay, those guys are taking care of it, no problem. I wish I was more engaged. I did more so at the end, but what would you do to engage those guys?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think my own personal story, being able to tell it as an ex-player, as I go from team to team to team to team, meeting with these guys, I think that would be the thing that I leaned on most in trying to get players more engaged. And just in a real brief way, and I know guys like this, but the player's path is you struggle for a good long while just to get into the league. Then you struggle to establish yourself as a certain kind of player. And the point in that is, if you have a 10-year career, the first 5 years of your career, your head is down. You're focused on nothing but the game. You got no time for the business of the players union, right? You got no time for that at all. And then even if somebody does get engaged in that, it's usually in the back half of their career. I would try and tell that story because the union is a vital, the collective bargaining and the union being involved in that and having the buy-in, the consensus of all players, it's critical to the union representing you fairly and in earnest. So I'd be encouraging players with my personal story to hopefully get them involved, because here's the thing: from Alan Eagleson to Bob Goodenow to Ted Saskin to now Marty Walsh, nobody's got a former player's background. I think it's harder to make that point to get maybe meaningful buy-in. I think that would be helpful to somebody in the executive director role.
Cool.
If that makes sense.
That's cool.
Awesome.
I think we got one more.
Yeah, I'm going to ask one question.
Boy. We love this one.
So does you had to choose one out of the two. Would Stu Grimson prefer like that big fight or to score a goal?
Oh, 100%. The big goal. I mean, that's what we all live for. Like, there's no feeling like it, without question. And listen, I like locking horns. Didn't like locking horns. I like winning anytime I locked horns with somebody like Knux or any of the other, badasses I played against. But scoring a goal, I mean, there's nothing that gets your juices going like something like that. The greatest goal of my NHL career, I scored in the context of the conference final. And for a ham and egger like me, who, when the playoffs got that deep, I'm getting 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes of ice time a night. I scored a game-tying goal against the Blackhawks in Game 5. It was like my head exploded. It was the most awesome experience of my life.
That's awesome. We ask that question a lot of guys. Who said fight? Someone did say fight, Tim, though.
Maybe Arbor Jack guy might have said that.
Yeah, maybe Arbor.
Well, there's some weirdos out there.
It is kind of weird. You don't grow up 7 years old, like, hey, I'm gonna be
Rob Ray.
Go ahead.
Rob Ray, Brian McGrattan. I was just with Big Earn up in a deal we did in Winnipeg, an alumni event we did in Winnipeg. Big Earn loved it. Yeah. McGrattan loved it. I mean, he was a badass. He was a good fighter. He's good at what he did, but he really liked it. He's a sick man.
Listen, Stu Grimson, I got to tell you, awesome that you took the time for us. I appreciate it. You're a good man. Here's one of the guys that, honestly, I have a ton of respect for you. I think you're an awesome. I love hockey guys to begin with, but tough guys even more so. But you stand out in the crowd to me, and I really appreciate you joining us. It means a lot.
Knux, I've enjoyed, the journey, me and you kind of getting to know each other over the years. I've enjoyed that so much. I've always had the utmost respect for you, my friend. I'll drop everything and join you, whatever you're doing, whatever it is, you just say the word. But you're a heart and soul guy, my friend. You wear your heart on your sleeve, and I've always loved and admired that about you. Tim, I've enjoyed getting to meet you for the first time, my friend. I look forward to seeing you again down the road.
Appreciate it, Stu.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the Raw Knuckles podcast. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe.